Good morning, everybody. My name is Beth Van Ness. Can you all hear me? Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay, great. I'm using my phone and I'm on mute on my computer because my internet connection at home has been unstable for the last day or so. I also have two other people doing really important meetings in the house, so we're trying to manage unstable connection, Zooming, and everything we all work. I'm going to stop my video because it looks like it's got a bit of a tough connection here. So we're going to get started. I know Susan Toma-Berge is going to be letting people into the room as we get started. I think Susan's going to be introducing Wendy. I'll tell you a little bit about the Teacher Academy, and then we'll get going with today's session. All right. Wendy, do you want to share your screen? We also ask that everyone keep their sound muted unless you're speaking, and we'll go over a few other norms too. So I'll turn it over to Susan.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Susan Toma-Berge, and I coordinate the multiple subject program here at UC Irvine. And in this role, I have the privilege and honor of working with many mentor teachers across Orange County and our schools. And through this work, I'm able to kind of peek into classrooms around the county to kind of see what kind of innovative things they're doing. And so this past spring, when, as you know, all of our schools shut down, my student teachers would complete assignments where they had to describe the work that they were doing. And Wendy Hammett has been one of our mentor teachers for many years at UCI, and I know she was doing amazing things before school shut down, but I was so happy to see the kind of work she was doing after the school shut down. And I thought, well, this is information that we need to share. So I'm just so happy to be able to share Wendy's work with all of you, because she is an amazing teacher, both in person and virtually. So being to share your work with all of us.
You ready for your next slide?
Yeah. Before we jump into Wendy's talk, and Wendy, if you just want to sort of get the images up, great, thank you. I just want to share with everybody a little bit about the UCI Teacher Academy. The UCI Teacher Academy is just entering in its third year at UC Irvine. We're a new entity, and we're really, our focus is to be providing a space for teachers to come together, teacher leaders, administrative leaders, to really think about improving their practice over time. My name is Elizabeth Van Ness. I'm the faculty director of the UCI Teacher Academy, and I've been working with Susan and other folks at UCI, and now we're really thinking about working with quality professional learning to teachers in the community. So you can see that the four key pillars of the Teacher Academy, and what we're really concerned with is bringing teachers together to collaborate, to inspire one another so that they can lead transformations in teaching and learning in classrooms. And I want to thank Schools First Credit Union for funding the UCI Teacher Academy. They gave us a gift a couple of years ago, and they're funding us in these activities that we're able to offer. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wendy. I am going to turn my video off. I'll be here listening in. And I really want to thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you.
So good morning, my name is Wendy Hammett, and I'm a fourth grade teacher in Santa Ana. I'm starting my 25th year in the district. And what I'm talking about today is how I build community in my classroom. And to me, community is all about relationships. And the classroom is, I'm sure it is to all of you, but the second piece that I think is just as important is how we build our relationships with our parents. And especially in our new world, how do we communicate with them? How do we interact with them? I feel like when we went virtual, because I had already established that, I was able to get a lot of buy-in very quickly with my parents, and it really made my class successful. It wasn't me, it was the group effort of me and my parents. And I was able to connect with 26 out of 27 students every single week. And the only one I didn't connect with was the one that started school with me on the Monday of the Friday that we went out. And she was my only one because I had no bond. I had only had her for 5 days, and I didn't have that parent bond, which I think is so much more, honestly, more important right now, even than the student bond without our. So I wanted to share a quote with you that was very life-changing for me. This is by a child psychologist, Haim Gano, and it really changed me in my classroom. I'm not going to read it to you. You're all readers. Can you see the screen well enough to read it? Okay. But when I started 25 years ago, my classroom was incredibly different than what you would see today. I was a yeller, I was a screamer, I was very reactionary. And this quote really helped me check myself and think about how I was behaving and how that really destroyed the community in my classroom, and how I needed to look at me and figure out how could I respond differently to my students in order to build community, build teamwork, and build relationships. I don't know it all, that's for sure, and I'm still learning. I was telling Elizabeth, I'm in a book now called Culturized, which is by Jimmy Casas, and it's all about changing not just our classrooms, but our entire school, because you know, being adequate, being average is just not okay. And how do we build? He talks in here repeatedly about the 3 R's, which are relationship, relationship, relationship. And it really is the most important thing that we do, both with our students and with our parents. So I'm going to play a clip from you from my favorite person to listen to. And if you have never heard Rita speak, she is absolutely amazing, and she has other videos. This is from her TED Talk. It's an excerpt. The actual video is about 8 minutes long, but I'm going to play to you just a piece of Rita's TED Talk.
We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best, and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection, it's the relationships. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know it. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion, every child, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.
If you've never seen her TED Talk, as I said, that's just an excerpt. It's actually between 8 and 10 minutes long, but it's incredibly powerful. And she really does focus on relationships. So we're going to do a quick breakout room to just talk about, because obviously relationships are important in the classroom, but now as well outside of the classroom. So what resonated with you as you listened to Rita, and then what was your challenge in maintaining relationships when we went virtual? So Susan's going to put you into groups, and it's just going to be a quick 5-minute chat. So I'm hoping that you had some great conversations and that you were able to think about, how you built relationships and what those challenges are. Obviously, building a relationship even in class is hard. The story that came to mind for me was a student that I had named Javier. I had him several years ago now, but he was probably the most challenging student I've ever had in my life. And I had to work extra hard every day with him, but he came from a home where there was incarcerated family members. There were just so many things outside of his control. And he was the kid that if I had a substitute, he would sync them every single day. If I had a student teacher, unless I was in the room, it was just going to be a nightmare. But when I was there, it took a really long time to build that relationship. And it took me proving to him that I wasn't going to quit and I wasn't going to give up. And I think that's what a lot of our relationship building is all about. And I was able to handpick his 5th grade teacher, somebody who I knew would be very patient with him. And I'll never forget him walking to my classroom in his oversized suit the last day of school as he got ready to promote. Don't underestimate those relationships. So what do I do in my classroom to build? I start off, my theme in my classroom is fail. And at first when you tell the kids that, and they're like, what do you mean you want me to fail? But then I explain that FAIL stands for first attempt in learning. And I did not create this. I got this someplace else. I created this little poster that hangs in my room. And I tell them, if you walk into my door and you do everything perfectly, all year long, and you would not do my job, you didn't learn anything, you knew it all. So failing is part of the learning process. And the kids have to understand that our classroom, whether it's a virtual classroom or whether it's an in-person classroom, is a safe place to fail. I tell my student teachers the same thing. This is a safe place for you to fail. I can help you clean up the mess, because we all fail even as teachers. And sometimes we're so afraid to show them when we fail. And we want to try to be the sage on the stage. And we think somehow they won't respect us if we don't do everything perfectly. I tell my kids, I am going to model failure to you on a daily basis. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes not. And that's okay. Once we understand that it's a safe place, then we start to discuss growth mindset. The power of yet. So this is a bulletin board. I have a picture of my bulletin board in my classroom. And on the first day of school, we start off with talking about power yet. Just adding the word yet comes up to me and says, Mrs. Hammett, I don't get it. I say, excuse me, and they add the word yet, because there's lots of things we don't know. At the beginning, we talk about the power of yet and how there's so much we have to learn, and that's okay. We create a bulletin board where the kids get little just paper cutout shapes, and they write about things that they don't know yet. And start with yourself. Be vulnerable with them. And I always kind of go a little extreme with my kids, so I'll say something like, I don't know how to fly a helicopter yet. I don't know how to scuba dive yet. Now, some of those things I probably will never learn, but there's other things. I'm learning about digital teaching. I don't have it perfected yet. And I think that, the kids buy in when they feel like we understand their struggles. There's a great video series. I'm not going to play the video for you, but there's a great video series through class shows. A link to the first one. They're available on YouTube. They're short, 2-3 minute videos that talk about the fact, this first one talks about our brain being a muscle, and how this boy, one of these characters feels like he can't do anything, and his friends teach him that the brain can grow. Intelligence is not static, and that we can improve our intelligence, which is actually fairly new science that they're learning. We used to think that, you could, my husband says Mensa doesn't like this idea, but the idea used to be that whatever your IQ was, that's your IQ. And they're finding now that it's not true, that we can increase our knowledge and our understanding and our brain. So I start with that, all on the same page, all building together a safe place to learn. What I like about this is I have the gate kids, and I also pretty much designated. We still have a lot of gaps. And this kind of puts everybody in the same boat, on a level playing field, that we're all here to learn. Even you high kids that think you know everything, you're going to learn something this year. And those of you that are struggling, that's okay too. This last year, my strongest girl came in my lowest reader, but embraced the power of yet, and was reading at grade level by her own effort by the end of the year. So giving them, empowering them is so important. In the classroom, of course, we do a lot of activities, and I'm sure you do some of these activities, but some of the things that I do, I start every day with a daily greeting. Life gets busy, classes get busy. I take this opportunity to say good morning to them, but more importantly, I'm looking at their face, I'm looking at their eyes. Do they look like something is happening? Are they teary-eyed? Is there a problem? If not, I simply say good morning and let them walk in the door. If I have a question for them unrelated to their physical appearance in the morning, I ask them to step aside. This is also their opportunity to ask me if they can step aside if there's something they need to talk to me about. Once the rest of the line's gone in, we have a 2 or 3 minute chat. It just helps me every single day to make sure I have talked to every single student, because I know it's so easy to get so overwhelmed that, during your day, and you're running from thing to thing to thing. So just starting it calmly, talking to everybody. And this can be done as a virtual check-in as well. 5-minute virtual appointments, or be in your Zoom 5-10 minutes early and let them come in, and as they come in, greet them. How you doing? And that's what I love about breakout rooms, is if somebody seems like they have something going on, we can jump into a quick breakout room and have that private conversation. Same thing here, partner work. Obviously in a classroom, we want them to learn to partner. And I like to also find experts for things. To understand that helping is not cheating. That's the part, we're all on the same team, we're all learning. It's not cheating. Sometimes they get so controlling of their knowledge, and they're so afraid to share what they understand, but they can be better teachers than us. I teach a computer science program through UCI, and my students so quickly surpass me, and they'll come to me and say, Mrs. Hammett, I can't do this. And I'll say, I need an expert. Who knows how to do this? And I'll have 5 or 6 kids, and it empowers them in the classroom and really makes them feel like an important part of that room. Group activities, some of these can be done in person, some of them are virtual. I am going to give you this presentation, and all of these different activities are hyperlinked to more information that's readily available on the web, but they are all hyperlinked, so don't feel like you have to write everything down. These ones are obviously ones that I do in the classroom. The marshmallow, we work so hard those first few weeks of school on teamwork. This is my favorite one, and I'm hoping that we'll go back to real school someday, because this one really does have to be done in person. But this is the rubber band cup stacking. And what I love about this, is that the kids just take a rubber band, they tie 4 strings on it, but they have to pull together to expand that rubber band in order to be able to grab the cup and stack them. And if they don't work together, if one kid pulls too hard, the rubber band becomes a weird shape that won't go around the cup. If one kid is not pulling at all, same problem. So it really shows them that every person on that team matters, and that when we do a group project, we all work together. And if we don't, if one person's a slacker, or if one person is trying to do everything, we all fail. And so I just love this activity for that. And it's so simple, and it's materials that a lot of people have in classrooms. Other things that are out there, there's a new virtual escape room on Teacher Pay Teacher. Not that I want to, it's not mine, but something I happened to run across. I think it cost me $6 or $7 that I'm going to do. And then the idea of a me bag can be done virtually as well. You just get a paper bag, decorate it, put things in that represent them, and then here on Zoom, show their things and explain how it helps them or how it represents them. There's lots of things that we can do, whether we're in person or virtual, to get to know each other and to build that relationship together. Once that relationship is built, how did I maintain? Of course, once we got into virtual, and I use Google Classroom. And so for me, even before we were virtual, but once we were virtual, it's a digital classroom hub. If you haven't used it, it's very user-friendly. You can organize your links, your assignments, your material. It's powerful because as we moved through virtual, kids would post questions on here, and many, many times before I ever got into the classroom to answer those questions, other students already had done it. They took ownership because they all knew that they could answer and that was perfectly fine because there's a lot more of them than me. It also has class calendar, things like this. I would notice when I was doing my Zoom meetings, every time I would start my Zoom meeting, I would get an alert that something was going on Google Classroom. And I would click in there just to see. And I had a student, Joshua, that every single day, he was like the class town crier. He would log into Zoom and say, Mrs. Hammett's in there, everybody get in, let's go, let's go. And would actually, log, if somebody had printed a question or something, he would go and reply to them. Zoom, go to Zoom. Why didn't you just go to Zoom? So they start to use going. I don't know, honestly, for my school district, if we're using Zoom or Google Meet this next year. I started with Google Meet in March, and I moved to Zoom. So I wanted to kind of give you a kind of a difference of how I used the two. What I like about Google Meet is you can have a classroom code and the kids can go in there without you. So I considered this if they were working on an independent project or their recess time, if they just wanted to hang out with their friends, they could go into Google. It was more informal. I can jump in and out of it, but I didn't sit in there. For Zoom, this is where we did our formal lessons. They were our formal meetings. I have to open and close the Zoom. So they knew that if they came into Zoom and they got in, I was there and I could be there to help them. And I love the fact that breakout sessions are available in Zoom. This school district is actually going to provide us with our schedule, but this is kind of how I did it to incorporate everything. Office hours on Zoom, and then we had our formal lessons and then more office hours. One of the things I know is we're talking about building community, and we're talking about our next part, which is our parents, is having office hours at different times during the day. Some of our parents came back, they said, we work during the day and we're trying to help our kids at night, but there's never an office hour at night. So as we start to build community with our parents, we have to start thinking of those things as well. So why do we need to involve parents? So this is a poll everywhere. So in the chat, Susan is going to put a link for you where you can click on it and answer this question before we start talking about parent community. Why do we need to involve our parents when we're building community? By the way, Poll Everywhere is free. You can set up an account and you could use this with parents. What questions do you have? They can text. It has a texting feature too. I did not activate the texting feature today, but it does have that. And this would be a way to get information. I love the idea of the triangle. I think I might steal that from whoever put that in. That may be a new poster in my room. I want to go ahead and move on in just a second, but I see the word partner a lot. I see I see so many of you, like they're the first teachers, they're crucial, but a lot of our parents don't feel that way. They don't feel valued unless we show them that they're valued. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. How do we build this community outside of the classroom? And one of the things I want to go back to is that idea of the power of yet. A lot of our parents, at least let me be clear, where I work, most of my parents are second language learners. I have a high immigrant population. They don't feel empowered unless I empower them. They know how important they are in their students' lives, don't get me wrong, but they don't always feel that the education system understands them or values them or them. And we have to show them that they're just as important. And so, you know, our parents, they struggle with some of the same feelings that our students have. I've talked to parents that say, I want to help in school, but I don't speak the language, or I don't know what I can do, and you know what? That's for us to help. We have to help them understand that their contribution, okay, maybe they're not going to grade my English tests, but can they come in and work with a small group? Can they come in and help with something? Absolutely. And right now with virtual learning, we absolutely need their support. So we have to understand that they have some of our same struggles our students have. There's a language barrier. There may be an education barrier for some of our parents. And some of them just are unfamiliar with our system. They don't know how to get involved in your classroom. So what I use and what I do is I start to involve my parents as soon as it's called Blooms. And I'm going to talk mostly about Blooms today for this part, just because that's what I'm most familiar with. But I'm also going to share with you other apps that are very similar, that have a lot of the same features. But what's important, regardless of how you do it, is that as soon as possible, we start involving parents. So I have this Blooms app, and the very first day of school, I take pictures and I start sending out messages to parents. I start doing weekly summaries. One of the things that my parents love, when I write homework on the board, I snap a picture of it and send it out in this app. So there's never any question of whether is there homework, is there not homework. The parents all have it. In a picture, they know exactly what's going on. The more you start involving them, you start to build community with them. You start sharing responsibility with them. And the reason I feel this is so important is that we all know that there are going to be times conversations with our parents, but if that's the conversation we've had with our parents, we haven't gotten a lot of buy-in and grace from them. Where if we have a relationship with them, we're much more likely, when those tough times and those tough conversations come, to have our parents willing to step in with us. As part of that, I'm going to steal that triangle idea. So involving them as soon as possible, daily, weekly updates, pictures, screenshots, phone calls and messages, and positive, not just negative. I had a student a few years ago who struggled with reading. He struggled so much, but when class, he was brilliant. His comprehension was great, but I would give him our standardized test and he would come in as up at a second grade. I teach fourth grade, second grade reader. And I finally pulled him aside and I said, "What? I don't understand. What's going on?" And he told me that the test was timed and the little clock flashing in the corner stressed him out and he panicked. And I said, "Okay, I'm going to take away I took away the clock, at least scored at grade level. And when I called him up to my desk and I said, you did it, look, I think he scored a 4.4. And he was so emotional, but even more so when I said, okay, well, we need to call your mom. And he looked shocked. And I said, well, don't you think she should know this information? We picked up the phone and we called her right then and there. And the mom started to cry and told me that she was afraid he had gotten in trouble. She'd never had a teacher call for a positive reason. And we're busy, and I know that, and there's language barriers, and I know that. But if we can make those positive interactions happen, it really helps us out when it's time for the negative ones, or when we have to have partnerships and things. So make those phone calls. What I love about Blooms and many of the apps that are out there today are a lot of them have translation features. So last year I had not just Spanish speaking parents, I had English speaking parents, and I had Portuguese speaking parents. And I app my message in English, whether it's my post like you see here, or if I was using a chat feature, and it automatically translated it to the language that the parents chose on their end when they set up their account. Does the same thing the other direction. All of my parents could message me in their language of choice, and it translates it to English for me. Before I had that translation feature, I used Google. Google Translate's out there. It's free. We can use it. And you know, there's really so many things to help us break down that language barrier and include our parents. Virtual parent conferences and meetings. I had a lot of parents coming into my Blooms calls, or excuse me, my Zoom calls last year. They want to connect, especially during this time. My plan actually is to have parent conferences the first couple of weeks of school, where if they want to talk to me to start building that relationship, we're going to have, we need building up our rapport with them virtually at the very, very beginning, if we want them to be able to, you know, help us sustain and actually have quality teaching models. And I mentioned this already, but one of the things that I saw in our parent feedback from my school was that they really need evenings. We need to find ways to accommodate. If we want them to partner with us, we've got to accommodate some of their schedules too. A lot of them work, you know, as I do. I remember my friend was in the PTA with my own children, and she said, you never come to a PTA meeting. And I said, well, have one when I could actually come. If you come, you know, you have your PTA meeting at 8 o'clock on a Friday morning, you've pretty much told me you're not interested in the working parents' participation. So, you know, as a parent, I felt that way. So I know that we have to find ways to accommodate our parents that are out there working. I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about Blooms, and I wanted to show you what it's like. It's very to several of the other apps out there, but this is just, like I said, the particular one that I used. And so it has features to it. I don't work for Blooms. Let me just put that out there. I have no connection to them outside of the fact I just love this app. Right here, all of my parents, one-on-one texting. Here it works very similar to a Facebook type post where I can post updates and parents can respond. One of my favorite things that it's not just in this app, a lot of the apps have now is signups and parent conferences. You can do it right here digitally. You know, back when I started teaching, it's been around a few years, and we used to send home parent conference forms and tell the parent, your conference form is 9 o'clock on Tuesday. And then we would get upset when the parents didn't show up, but the parents were at work at 9 o'clock on Tuesday. And we assigned them spots as opposed to letting them make the choices. And now with this, I can actually set my conference time. Parents can go on an app, check their time. Something comes up, they can switch their time. I now rarely have a parent miss a parent conference, whether it's virtual or in person, because they're in control of it. It updates my calendar automatically. Blooms is my preferred, but there are so many apps. So we're going to give you the link to this chart. I did not create this. This is online. And it shows many of the features of lots of different apps. I found out this week that my district has decided to go to Parent Square, so I'm learning this one. And I tell you, when I was in my staff meeting and my principal told me or told us that we were using Parent Square, this is the first document I opened, because I was a Class Dojo person. I've used Remind as well. First thing I noticed is that it's missing all of the student portfolio and behavior management. So if, I liked this form because if my district is going through Parent Square, then I may need to use an additional thing if I want to be able to use something like Blooms and Class Dojo. They both have features. I took daily attendance using Blooms when we were virtual, and I gave participation points in Blooms when we were virtual, and points for showing up to Zoom meetings and points for finishing assignments. And when the kids reached the goal of 25 points, their parents received an email automatically saying that they had unlocked a goal and they had earned, it's a little monster, as Class Dojo does the same thing. These are things that can be done in class or virtual. So lots of apps out there. When you're looking at these, one of the things I would definitely pay attention to is had that notice, and now I'm looking to find the right line for that. I believe that Parent Square, here it is. So most of these, though these all have translation features, which is to me one of the most important things I needed. 50 languages, 100 languages, 140 languages. So whichever one you choose, just know you're going to have that language support, which will help you to build that community with your parents in their language. Susan, did you provide the link? Do you guys want to take a minute and go look at that?
The link is in the chat.
The link is in the chat. Anybody want to share one of these that they use and what works well for them?
Wendy, I'm from Santa Ana Unified, and I can share that our district is moving towards using Parent Square so that our parents clearly understand where they have to go for information, regardless if they're intermediate, high school, elementary school, so they don't get confused. And Parent Square very much is what you just said. It has all of the features except that classroom discipline feature, the classroom incentive feature, the classroom, that if a teacher wants to use that, they can absolutely keep using whatever program they want to use. But so Parent Square is great. I've also used Class Dojo, and I dabbled in Blooms, but there's so many out there now. It's like everything. There's so many different options.
Yeah.
In the chat,
Yeah, there's a lot of them out there. Using the raise your hand feature, is there anybody who doesn't use an app? Or should I not ask? Maybe I shouldn't ask that question. So I think it is something that we are probably pretty good at. I just want to reiterate again, using these apps is important because it makes parents feel like they're part of our team. And if they're part of our team, then, and I know I said this already, but I'm repeating, they're just, it makes, if the only communication you ever have with a parent is your 3 or 2 parent conferences a year, they don't feel part of your team. And a lot of times they're not comfortable coming to you if they don't feel like you have a and if there is an issue, I had a bullying issue in a classroom, and I was able to deal with the parent because we had a relationship. We had had lots of conversations, and then we were able to deal with the situation. The more our parents feel connected to us, the more likely they are to come to us with our problems, because I'm sure you've had the experience I've had where you get a call from the principal's office saying, oh, there's this issue in your classroom, this parent came to me. And my first thought is always, well, why didn't they come to me? And the more we communicate And the more comfortable that they feel with us, the more likely they are to come straight to us and stop the middleman of the principal's office. So for those of you that are not using an app, or even if you are, because I use Blooms, I reached out to them and I let them know that I was going to do this training, and they offered this. If you are interested in trying out Blooms, create an account at blooms.net and then send them an email to appreciation@blooms.com and title it Teacher Institute and tell them something that you would like or would like to try. They're going to give you a 3 months free to the only 3 months. I'm telling only 3 months. So if you love it, you're in trouble. But 3 months free to their premium program, which has all the features. They do have a free version as well. It just has some less limited features. I didn't reach out to the other companies. I only reached out to this one because this is the one I personally use. So I was able to ask them for that. And I get nothing whether or not you do it or not. I get no kickback, just so you know. But this is something that they wanted to offer to the Institute. So again, you'll get a copy of the presentation, and so you'll have that information there. So what are our next steps? So as I start looking forward, and again, as I said, I'm learning this too. I'm working on this too, and thinking about how do we translate all of this into our next year. So I just wanted to give you some of the things that I guess are rolling around in my head right now. And, I'm trying to think, how can I do one-on-one virtual conferences? Because right now, every single one of our parents and every single one of our students has different needs. And so kind of and I don't know exactly where I'm going. This is just me brainstorming, really, but I'm thinking of how I can create virtual conferences where I can meet with student and parent and say, how did the spring go for you? What were your challenges? And how can we now set you up to be more successful this time? Because this time it counts. And I think that's going to be the hardest thing for all of us. Last time it was all enrichment, and now it counts. And we are growing the same problems. In our district, we had horrible problems with internet access. There is unequal access, and even the students that received internet access through some of the programs that were offered, I know Spectrum was really big in Santa Ana, their internet access was still unstable. And then you have 2 to 3 different students possibly on that same internet at the same time. And so, how are we going to start mitigating some of those issues? We can wait for our districts to try to solve it, but it takes a long time for that wheel to turn. And so meeting with our parents, how can we best help them? I was discussing this with my husband and talking about when I'm doing reading groups, I think I might do, let students sign up for what time they want. Instead of doing leveled reading groups, I might do time available reading groups. You can sign up. Do you want to come at 9? Do you want to come at 2 to start accommodating and meeting the needs of our kids? And it's going to look different. Virtual back to school night, letting parents know our expectations, letting kids know our expectations. One of the struggles that I'm having, and I think this is why my district went to Parent Square, is how do we get our parents onboarded with whichever app you choose to do? I know with Blooms, I can send emails with invitations, but with Parent Square, it works with our enrollment system. So you might want to find out if your district is using one that works with the enrollment system, where my parents are automatically onboarded. Otherwise, that is something that whichever app you think about, how are you going to get them the information to get them connected that very first time? And what is day one going to look like? If you're in Santa Ana, we don't even know when day one is. They're pushing it back as they're trying to figure things out. So, what is our day one going to look like? And one of the other I would put on here is, how can we work together? What are the resources at your school? Who can you connect with, even virtually like this, to find support? Because they've always said teaching is the loneliest career out there, because we're alone with kids all day and we rarely interact with each other. And now we're all in separate rooms and separate houses, and we're not even, can't even physically be together. So you know, as you're thinking about supporting your students and building your community, I would also suggest that you look at your teacher community and what can you build there, so that you know, we're not all redoing everything and recreating the wheel and doing it alone, because it's going to be probably the hardest year of all of our careers and a lot of challenges. And so making sure that you have a community for yourself as well is going to be incredibly important. And that's all I have for you. I'm happy to take questions or brainstorm or everybody like to do. I can answer or try to answer.
Wendy, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if you noticed, and I think you said this, that the parents themselves need, initially, it's going to be real vital that the parents themselves have an office time to connect with you. It's not just going to be the students, but if we're, especially the parents of younger children. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, I know for me, when I was doing my Zoom, I several different times had parents popping in. I would have, or a student would message me and say, my mom has a question. And so what I found for myself was in the spring, I was incredibly available. You know, I was home, so why not? There was actually one day I was at Costco meeting with a student on Zoom, leaning up against the, you know, when we first were able to go anywhere. So I think having formalized, so I think I pretty much was awake. My kids knew they could get a hold of me, but I think having parent times when you have office hours just for parents, you know, so that they can tell you what their struggles are, what their issues are, and it may be with the student as well, but it may not. But my thought is I'm going to have virtual office hours and parent meetings, maybe at the beginning, once a week, once every other week, where I can share some stuff or just be available for questions. Did that answer your question?
Thank you, Wendy. Yes, I think that's really important, especially as we get going. You might not need to be as available to the parents, you know, in week 10 and 12 versus week 1 and 2. But okay, thank you.
Hi, Wendy. I have a question. So I was Wendy's student teacher when you've been using a lot of these things even before things went virtual. So my question is, when teaching went virtual, is there anything like extra or anything different that you had to do on top of like Blooms and all the communication tools that you've been using?
Different. I had to get used to being in front of a camera. I'm not excited about being in front of a camera. And one of the hardest things for me, but I think really helped with my kids, is I'm really big on read alouds. And if you're an upper grade teacher, my absolute favorite read aloud is There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom by Louis Sacker, because it's about a student who transforms throughout the year and how students' opinion, his classmates' opinion of him transforms as well. And so it shows that kid that has had the reputation from kindergarten on, life can change. And so I think the biggest thing I did was continue that. And so I would get comfy in the chair and record myself reading my daily read aloud, and continuing that on with my students, but doing it virtually, and then having like a little virtual book club. And it was more optional, but the kids that did it, I ended up, I started with one book and then I gave them choices, and I ended up having to buy the entire series of the book that I had started because they wanted to continue that story and were so invested in it. So asynchronous learning, I guess, is what I learned and what I instituted that was new. I'm very, very hands-on. It's very hard for me to be hands-off. And so doing lessons that I wasn't right there with, or the read alouds or things like that, I guess is what I added in. And congratulations on your new job, Amy.
Wendy, I'll ask one more question. Have you found a site where you've been able to gather some ideas for the team building activities that can be done virtually? Like the Saving Fred and the marshmallow building and all those that we used to do, you can't do that. So I'm just wondering, do you have some good, because we're gonna be starting off with a new class and new kids and all that kind of stuff. Have you discovered that yet or found one?
I have not found one particular site.
Okay.
Pinterest
Yeah.
has so many things. And there's a lot of freebies on Teacher Pay Teacher as well. You don't have, not everything charges. There's a lot of get to know you activities that people are making virtual. The other thing to remember, if you haven't done it, if you have any PDF online, you can just upload it to Google and put text boxes over where they would normally write, and it can be a fillable document that way. So, it would take a little bit of time, but it's not that challenging. You just put a text box over it, and then you might want to fill it white so that it doesn't have whatever lines were there previously. And then through Google Classroom, you can send that out to kids, and it's a fillable document. The other thing I really like for doing any kind of team building is Flipgrid. If you're not familiar with Flipgrid, the kids use the camera on their computer and they can take little video snippets of themselves. And so we did an All About Me activity at the end of the year. They had to draw a picture that represented them and then do a video to talk about themselves and how these things represented them. And we had based it on the Seal of California. This actually was my student teacher, not me. I can't take credit for it. But he based it on the Seal of California, what all the different symbolisms were. Then their own. And then they can watch each other's video on Flipgrid and they can comment on it and things like that. And I learned so much, and it really gave a voice. I had a student that I just thought was the sweetest guy, but I never heard his voice when we were in the classroom. And I so enjoyed his Flipgrids because he really came to life. He lost his fear when he was being videotaped, and it really gave him a voice. So I would recommend Flipgrid as well as a great get to know you activity. And it's free. I like anything that's free. All right, Susan, I'm going to send it back to you.
Wendy, you'd mentioned earlier a virtual escape room that you paid for. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
So if you're familiar with escape rooms, my family loves them. It's puzzles that they figure out. Teacher Pay Teacher. Again, I think it cost me $7. And you put them in groups, put them in breakout rooms, and then they have a series of locks that they have to open. It's connected to Google Forms. I can try to find the link and send it out to the Teacher Pay Teacher. But they have they have puzzles they have to do, and at the end, if they're correct, they put this code into a Google form, which is automatic grading, and it will either tell them yes and send them to the next challenge, or tell them no and have them try again. And I thought it would just be a good way for them to start bonding together, and it's mathematics based. And as they, and then it's a race to see who's the first one that can escape their breakout room and come back to the regular one. So it's new for me. I haven't. I'm excited to try it, and anything that I can do. At the end of the year, I spent a lot of time because I wanted my kids to still feel like they were part of a class. So we did a lot of things like that. We did a lot of logic puzzles, the ones where it'll say there's 4 kids and they have, their last names are blank, 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 and this one has, and then they have to try to match it all up. My kids loved them, and it just gave them an opportunity to still work together in a more fun way. Math word problems can become logic puzzles and challenges. We use math expressions in our school district. I don't know if you use that, but it has a little character called Puzzled Penguin. He gets every math problem wrong. And it's, for the kids to understand and critique others' work. But I always just go, oh my gosh, you guys, it's the penguin again. We've got to help him. And so we would do that in our chat rooms and look at his work, and they all would just scratch their head. You know, anything that they can do as a team will help them to build that community, and mixing up those groups. And sometimes put those kids together that you don't think you want together. We did a coding challenge, and I had 2 kids, I never would have put them together, but they did so well. This was not virtual, this was in class, and I happened to be listening to them, and the one was going, wow, you're a really good partner. Wow, you really helped me with that. And I literally almost fell out of my chair, because these 2 never got anything done when I put them in any other group. They just could not work with others, but when I put them together, they turned into different children. And it just, so, you know, don't be afraid to mix up your groups.
All right, Wendy, why don't we unshare your screen? When we designed this workshop, we wanted to spend the last few minutes kind of just brainstorming, asking questions, working together. And so those of you who are still here, Wendy's work was Wendy's. And so what kinds of questions do you have about your first day of school, or what are some ideas you can share with the group? Because I think this is when collaboration is the most important. Like Wendy said, it's probably going to be the most challenging year of our careers. And so what are some things that you are questioning, or what are some ideas you have? So when there's a group this size, I like to have people just write the word hand in the chat box, so then I can call you in order. So either questions you have or ideas you would like to share would be really helpful right now. I don't hear from anyone to call in my brave UCI.
Here's the question. I'm Jose.
Okay.
You know,
Jose.
You know, one of the things that as I prepare for the opening of this next school year is the idea of grades. And so that's one of the things that I'm sure the parents are going to be, you know, curious about, because from the last time we were basically instructed to not issue any fails. And so, you know, for me, the main worry is how am I going to address that issue, because the president was already set that, you know, because of this, you know, health crisis we're going through, I mean, my concern is, are the parents going to be on the same, you know, thinking that, you know, it's still going to be on like that, so you're not accountable for the work that you'll be assigned? And if so, what will be, you know, the weight of those assignments? So as I prepare for my semester, it's kind of like, you know, I'm going to with the grades based on the fact that, you know, none of the kids were failed this time around. Like where I'm coming from, my biggest question at this point.
Well, I can start to answer that one. I know that's why I want to have a virtual back to school night as soon as possible, because I think that's something that is going to be a big challenge for a lot of our families. Is they have the same issues that they had 3 months ago. Right. A lot of those, you know, connectivity issues and things haven't changed. But yeah, the governor and everybody is saying, you know, it has to count. We can't just continue doing enrichment. I'm going to actually throw this back at my friend Rebecca, because Rebecca's an administrator. Rebecca, do you have any thoughts on that? Is she still here? Did she leave?
I don't see her.
Rebecca left. Jose, I wish I had an easy answer for that, but I would say, again, that's part of that beginning of the year and that expectations. Right. And that's why I think the conferencing and the virtual back to school night is going to be so important. I know my husband works in another district, and they're actually having drive-in orientation where the teacher will be there and parents are coming in. The teacher will be on a microphone and give expectations as they're handing out books and things. I think each district is handling that different, but it's going to be a really big challenge.
I'll say if I can jump in, I'm not sure, can you all hear me? I think so. I'm sorry, I'm using different devices. So I think your question really underscores actually a lot of the things that Wendy's talking about, which is really the importance of this ongoing communication. I could say at UC Irvine, I was in an administrative position last year, and we went to the kinds of issues. You know, this is very brand new. We were asking our faculty to adopt a very, adapt to students, really sort of pay attention to what students are needing. And, you know, I think our instructors and our faculty were really concerned about, well, how do we balance making sure that the students learn everything that they need to learn with the fact that we're living in the middle of an international pandemic that comes with fears, it comes with a lot of anxiety, it comes with a lot of uncertainty. And I think it really underscores a lot of what Wendy has been talking about today, which is really opening up these lines of communication with parents and families and asking kids how they're doing and talking with them and sort of getting a pulse on that. So I just think I know that we want to keep our standards high. Our kids are living through really difficult, challenging times. I also think this is a really great opportunity for teachers to come together and really talk about what assessment means and how do we understand assessment and what is assessment for? Because I think the notion of grading really raises, you know, one issue of like, are we sure that kids are getting what they need? But also in this time of a pandemic, how can we all, you know, think about assessment? So meeting in grade level teams, meeting with district leadership, asking for guidance on how to think about assessment. I think it goes to a lot of what Wendy was talking about, the notion of the power of yet. We might not know yet what assessment's going to look like. How can we learn with each other? How can we experiment with some things and opening up these lines of communication? So I know that's like not giving an answer, but I think it really underscores a lot of what this whole notion of like open communication, I think is really important. I will put a plug that we are going to have a session on assessment for the Teacher Academy. I don't have it in my mind exactly when that's happening. I can try to go back and look really quickly as we're talking and put the date. And I can also send an email that all of the sessions have been filled, but we can open it up to more participants. So, you know, it would be great if you want to attend that. I think they'll have some different ideas there on how people can be thinking about assessment.
Can I add something to the discussion? So I have a bit of a different situation because I'm high school, but what I heard in the question was a bit of anxiety of how teachers and students would adjust to the new paradigm after the last semester of not having the opportunity. What I got the most feedback on was kids were really upset that they weren't getting grades, and I think that they're more that they expect that there will be grades, and I think that they are happy in a way. I mean, of course, not everyone obviously will be happy, but I think that the students want to be graded and they want to get that grade. So I wouldn't worry too much about their expectations with regard to that, but of course the communication aspect is important, but I don't think that there's so much to fear in terms of getting them back on the idea that they will be graded.
And I would just like to add on to that just really quickly, especially for the high school. And I think the idea of them being graded, but I think the fact that we're thinking about how to grade, and I'm switched from teacher to parent lens for a minute because I have a rising senior at UC Davis who had an incredibly frustrating end of her year because the teachers weren't having the conversation we're having. They were still trying to just throw lectures online and grade the same way. And I think thinking about assessment and how is it going to look different. You know, she had a class where the professor did the same lecture as always, and he would get to a certain point and say, well, normally we would do an experiment here, but oh well, and keep going, not even have a video, not even have anything. And then it would show up on assessment. So, you know, thinking about what are we assessing, how are we assessing, and keeping in mind the fact that they don't have that interaction with us that is so valuable, and that will affect grades.
If I could add something, I have a rising senior at Aliso Niguel High School. My daughter is a rising senior, and I agree with what Wendy said about some of the things. That's one of the areas that we had a little bit of difficulty in. I know in our district was high school, the connection between the teachers and the students in high school, as in, you know, here's the information, you need to take in this information. There weren't any labs, but then things would show up on assessments for her. And in our district, we didn't do enrichment. We did continued learning, new learning with grades, you know, and she chose the grade option because she, you know, she gets pretty good grades. I mean, and she wanted to help out her GPA a little bit. And I teach second grade. Now in second grade, my biggest concern, so I agree with Katrina, what she was saying about the paradigm in elementary school, because we don't necessarily give grades, but we were not able to say that anyone was progressing. Even if they were progressing earlier in the year, our grades had to be that they met the standard. So we had to say pretty much that everybody met the standards in elementary, and which we didn't find out until, you know, a couple weeks or a week or so before the, you know, they decided on that before report cards and things were due. And so, you know, we had been assessing and doing everything all along. And even if you had a student that really was progressing and hadn't met the standard, you still had to say they met the standard. So my concern being a second grade teacher is I'm going to have these first grade students coming to me where they may have struggles in certain areas, but were met this spring. And so now I'm going to have to do that kind of backpedaling and back up a little bit and say, no, they met the standard for the time of distance learning. The standard that they should be, you know, is here's where your child is. And that's where I think when we get into, you know, some of and I don't know how we're going to do this, well, we're going to be doing dibbles like we usually do and how this is all going to work. But when we do get into doing some assessing to find out where the students are and where I'm starting with them, just that explanation to parents. And I think that one-on-one interaction with the parents, like Wendy was saying, and, you know, having those conferences earlier in the year with them to talk about their challenges from the spring. And then hopefully we've done some assessment by that time where I can say, well, here's where your child is, rather than kind of challenging where they were in the spring, you know, just letting them know, here's where I'm starting with them, you know, and here's where we're going. But that's one of the challenges for elementary school. Just I know because of the way we had to grade in the spring.
Anyone else? Okay, Susan.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and to hear Wendy's experience. I know I learned a lot, Wendy, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about what you do on your first day and beyond. And for all of you who are here today, thank you for your contributions and participating. And if you do have other ideas, please send them our way, because then we can kind of broadcast them out as well. We do have one more workshop at the end of the month for the elementary program, and that's for dual immersion teachers. And so is actually, and so hopefully also.
And I just want to add one more thought, in addition to Susan, her idea of sharing is We are starting a UCI Teacher Academy Facebook group. If people would be interested and willing to join that group, we're going to start posting once a week. We're going to be inviting folks to share. I think this conversation around assessment would be a great conversation for people to continue there. And that will also help us know ways that we can support additional conversations and bringing teachers together to really think about how to problem solve and provide the best learning experiences that we can for students. So thank you so much. And a very big thank you to Wendy and Susan for making this happen and supporting our teachers in our community. We're so grateful to have this expertise. Thank you.